All right.
Feels like Dave Letterman.
That's good. So self-driving cars, autonomous cars, I think everyone here likely understands the benefit of that. We know that it's going to be a thing. There's no more skepticism about it. But I think what I want to talk about now is the approach we get there and the impact it has on cities and communities. You guys both have different approaches. You're an investor in these companies. You're on the board of one of these companies. So Karen, we'll start with you. Why don't you just give us a 20-second look at what Nauto is and what you guys do?
Sure. So I'm on the board of Nauto. Nauto is about 3 years old, and we're an artificially intelligent technology company in the automotive sector. Essentially, taking a very complex and intricate technology and making it really simple to understand. We're helping cars and drivers become safer today, and this will all lead towards safer, smarter communities and roads in the future. And we do that through a two-way camera in fleets today that help us understand not only what's going on outside of the vehicle, but also what's going on inside the vehicle, and matching those two things together. And we'll talk about this, but it's vitally important, we think, to creating safer overall autonomous system in the future. We help fleet drivers know how to become better drivers and which routes are better, and we also help fleet managers know where to send their folks so that it's safer and know where they need to train today.
Great. And Quinn, AutoTech, a little bit different, but you're investing in these companies. So why don't you talk a little bit about your early investor in Lyft? I think that needs no explanation, but beyond that, what else are you guys interested in?
Sure. So I'm Quinn Garcia. I'm one of the managing directors of AutoTech Ventures. We're a venture capital firm that's based out in Silicon Valley. We manage a $120 million fund investing only in ground transportation.
So and that's not just autonomy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So anything related to movement of people and goods along roads is within our scope. So think of the biggest pain points related to personal transportation or transportation in kind of a commercial context, and that's where we focus. So how do you buy vehicles? How do you sell them? How do you finance them? How do you insure them, share them, repair them? All these kind of big pain points related to personal transport and commercial transport.
Great. So Karen, I want to start with you. You guys have an interesting approach. A lot of companies are building self-driving cars. You come from a traditional car manufacturer background, I guess. You guys have a different approach. You have this camera. You're collecting a lot of data. In addition to helping your customers now, the plan is to use this data down the road. Can you talk about 10 years out how this is going to affect self-driving cars?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm not sure anybody can really
maybe
talk about
10
years out.
Sure. But a few years out, the plan is
I can give you the vision for where we're going. So, as Quinn mentioned, we're also in Silicon Valley, and between Silicon Valley and Detroit and all over the world, there's incredible technology advancements being made as it relates to the vehicle itself, right? The technology to move the vehicle. And quite frankly, if that's all that was necessary, those vehicles would be on the road today because the technology is pretty good. The challenge is having those vehicles interact with humans, with the infrastructure that we currently have today. We're not about to have totally new infrastructure tomorrow, and understanding the patterns and behaviors of human drivers, what we do when we get in a car, where we like to go, how we think about it, how we communicate with each other. My car doesn't always communicate with other people. Sometimes I communicate eye to eye with other people, letting them know what I might be doing. So really bringing the human part, the driver part of what's going on into the equation, combined with all the great technology that can enable the vehicle to move from point A to point B. And so, for example, we track distracted driving a lot, and we really are getting very intelligent on where things are super distracted and where they aren't, and where they are really dangerous and where they're just not necessarily as dangerous. And things like crosswalks. Right now, today, we, for the most part, have crosswalks right next to the corners, intersections. Well, is that really the smartest place to have a crosswalk, knowing that, for example, in the future, autonomous cars will probably hesitate there, which means they'll also then likely back up traffic there. Would it be better to move the crosswalk in, right? And this has all to do with how we function as humans in our society and behind the wheel. And so I think what we bring to this very exciting space is that understanding that then can be shared with OEMs and other technology companies, and really make sure that we are developing a future that the vehicles coexist with the humans who are in the vehicle and outside of the vehicle.
And now, Quinn, you early investor in Lyft. What year did you invest in them?
So the company was actually founded out of my house.
Oh, wow, okay.
Many years ago, and then once our fund got formed in 2015, then the fund invested, and our fund's invested a bunch of times since then, and I'm personally on the advisory board there.
Right. So you've been in it since the beginning. Were you guys thinking of autonomy way back then, or were you just thinking, how did that... So talk about that transformation. The benefits of Lyft and Uber and ride sharing were apparent of their impact on towns and cities from the beginning, and it's really changed the way we get around. On many levels. I don't think I need to explain to anyone about that. At what point with Lyft did you guys realize, oh man, we got to get into this autonomy thing?
I think that right now in the U.S., ride sharing is a duopoly, right? So you have Uber and you have Lyft mainly, and there's a few others that are out there, right, that are kind of nipping at their heels, if you will. But I think that when autonomy comes, that's going to present a reset of the whole rideshare market, right? Because if you think about barriers to entry in ride sharing, you have this enormous cost and effort to acquire riders. And then on the other hand, you have this enormous cost and effort to acquire drivers. And you have to constantly balance this supply and demand of what's essentially a marketplace. So if you take out drivers, you actually reduce the barriers to entry for becoming a rideshare company. You then just need to focus on acquiring riders and vehicles. And so what do you need to do in order to acquire riders? Well, you need a strong brand, and you need a great user experience, and there's probably a lot more companies out there that are capable of doing that than just Lyft and Uber. So obviously we're very bullish on Lyft and Uber, but I also think that there's going to be a big reset, and Lyft is actually positioning itself for that reset by partnering with folks. So GM is an investor in the company, Jaguar Land Rover is an investor in the company.
You have a partnership with Waymo, but it's kind of unclear what that means. I don't know if you want to tell me, that would be great, but you're partnering with other
I won't dive into that,
yeah.
but I will say I will say that Lyft's approach has been one of partnership, as opposed to trying to develop everything in-house. And that was one of the things that made it really attractive to us from an investor perspective. Because we think it kind of diversifies a bit. I don't know who's going to be the winner in the autonomous game that's out there. Is it going to be Waymo? Is it going to be? We were talking about Nutonomy backstage a couple minutes ago. They're another partner of Lyft, right? So, do you bet on yourself as that sole horse, or do you go and partner with a bunch of other folks? And I think the latter is a better approach.
So, do you think Uber and Waymo are taking the wrong approach by trying to do it kind of all internally?
Well, I would say Uber. I won't speak to Uber's approach,
right.
But I will say in Waymo's case, they're partnering with Lyft, right? So they're actually, Google is an investor into Lyft, and they have a partnership with Lyft, in addition to pilots that they're running on their own.
Okay.
But Steve, I would comment, though,
sure.
having come from Detroit and worked at two major OEMs, both General Motors and Ford, I agree that this is a time of unprecedented partnership. And I think that most people in this initiative to create the future of mobility really understand that and are breaking down walls and barriers like never before. I mean, I've been in rooms where 5 OEMs are sitting around talking about how to collaborate on a certain problem. That didn't happen in the past. So I think that everyone understands it's a technologically very challenging thing to do, and as it relates to regulation and infrastructure and safety, it really is going to take a village for this to happen in a way that benefits everybody.
You almost predicted my next question, which is great. I love this, but I want to dive into that. So again, you come from a traditional car company background. The theme around those companies, the Fords, the GMs of the world, is that they're very slow to move, slow to innovate, very minor iterations year to year. Last few years, we've been seeing heavy investment and heavy publicity around their self-driving efforts. What do you think, Karen? What do you think changed? What do you think woke them up to start acting more like a tech company and less like an old school car company?
Well, that's a much longer conversation,
Yeah.
but I would say a couple things. If I just speak to General Motors and Ford, I think with renewed leadership at the top from both companies, with Al Mulally and a few years ago and Mary Barra taking over General Motors, they were really able to look out in a newer way and not be as beholden to the existing path. In some ways, the crisis of 2008 actually made this possible because they really had to look at how to pair off resources that they couldn't afford anymore or get rid of underperforming assets and really focus on a strategy going forward. So I think that really helped. I also think there's an intense pride in Detroit and in the OEM sector about their capabilities and the fact that they created this industry of moving vehicles other than horses a long time ago. And I don't think that they're very willing to give it up, to give up that leadership position. And then finally, having been there and worked with so many people, the talent that they have is phenomenal. So while it might be a bigger company, so it might have to deal with a lot more bureaucracy and deal with that, embedded in those companies are incredible people who really know how to run car companies, build vehicles, manufacture them. They have the technologies. And when it comes to the amount of resource, it's really hard to beat. When you're looking at a General Motors or Ford and they have tens and tens of thousands of fantastic engineers. So I think they believe they can win. I think that they will on many fronts. But I also think they too are partnering.
Yeah,
so
and they realize they have to partner with people.
They do.
That's what I was going to say.
They do,
Right.
and I think the fact that they've come to Silicon Valley, whether they've invested or they've set up offices or they come out a lot and just meet with us and how are things going. So I think that's very exciting. So for them to have the resources and the background and capabilities that they do, and then to open it up and partner with the world of new technology is really exciting.
I would just add to your comments. What I observed, a lot of our LPs in our fund are big incumbent transportation players, and they also told us that Tesla woke them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And Google woke them up, and Apple also woke them up. In addition to all those other factors that you described.
Yes.
That's really interesting here. So what was it about Google? It makes sense, and not Google, now Waymo. But what about Tesla was it? I mean, it's a sexy brand and so forth, but it's, anyone can make an electric car now. So what was it about Tesla that really woke them up? Not autonomy, because Tesla didn't start out autonomous.
The amount of hype around them, the amount of buzz, the PR, the market cap, which exceeded a lot of the incumbent players, despite Tesla having very, very low volumes. So Tesla's access to capital, their access to buzz, their ability to attract talent, the EV element. I think a lot of the incumbent automakers and auto parts suppliers recognize that they feel, and I think there's some truth to this, that Tesla's technology in terms of EV powertrain wasn't superior to theirs, but I think that a lot of them really respect Tesla's ability to do design. It's kind of taking a lot of Apple's concepts and competencies and applying it to producing a vehicle. And so the design of Tesla vehicles is I would say, widely respected in the incumbent auto industry, but their ability to scale and manufacture is not as well respected.
I've read the headlines. Yeah, they can't make that Model 3.
It's hard. It's hard producing cars.
We probably have a lot of entrepreneurs sitting here in the audience and likely interested in autonomy and likely interested in hearing what you have to think. When you're looking, I know you don't just do autonomous startups, but when you're looking at autonomy, what stands out to you? What do you want to hear besides a passionate entrepreneur? What on the product side are you looking for?
Yeah. So we've actually we've placed a lot of bets in perception. So if you think about the full autonomous stack, right? So you have localization. Where am I? Where am I in respect? An absolute position in the world, right? And then what are all the objects around me? That's perception. And then once I see all those objects around me, then I can chart a course through those objects to avoid running into stuff. That's path planning. and then you actually need to actuate the throttle and the brake and the steering to chart that course, right? And we felt that perception is one of the biggest challenges, and also one of the challenges that a lot of the incumbent players, the automakers, the auto parts suppliers, even some of the semiconductor companies, weren't quite as strong in, and would be more willing to partner with startups in that space. We also think that localization and path planning are also important, don't get me wrong, but perception felt like the lowest hanging fruit. So we invested into a company called DeepScale that is doing sensor fusion. So they gather raw data from LiDAR sensors, cameras, radar, and then they fuse it all together using neural networks. Then we also invested into a radar startup called Metawave. So LiDAR is getting a lot of the buzz out there, right, as this kind of holy grail that enables autonomous vehicles, and it's absolutely an important sensor modality. But radar is already mass-produced out there. But one of the challenges of radar is it's not as precise as LiDAR. So what if you could have a radar cost and a radar robustness against weather, but with the precision of LiDAR? That's kind of the thesis behind Metawave. And then lastly, we also invested into a startup called Xnor.ai that's out of Seattle that does ultra low power machine vision software. So this is software that basically just takes camera images and can detect objects in those camera images outside a vehicle using very low power silicon. So you don't need a very high power GPU from NVIDIA or one of the other players that's really expensive.
Great. So it's what I'm gathering from that is kind of democratizing, making it more accessible to partner with. Is that what you're looking at? Making it easier for them to partner and cheaper to grab these partners.
Yeah, I would say just expanding the tool set that autonomous engineers have available to them to engineer a full vehicle. So I view LiDAR as just one tool that an engineer has to perceive its environment, and radar is yet another tool, and sensor fusion is another tool, and high precision GPS is another tool. And so I think all of these different startups are performing a very important purpose and just expanding that regime of possibility. And I don't view any one of the different elements that go into an autonomous vehicle's perception stack or path planning stack as essential to the survival of autonomous vehicles or the advent of autonomous vehicles. Meaning, if you took out any one of those different pieces, I think we'd still end up with autonomous vehicles, maybe with exception to the camera. Going back to your guys' company, the camera is probably the one piece that I can think of that you really couldn't take away and still enable full level 5 autonomous vehicles out there.
So we need cameras. All right, let's go back to Nauto for a second. You're gathering all this data now. You're working with fleets and partners and things like that. At what point will you feel like you have enough data to start reaching out to other self-driving car companies and saying, hey, we can help you out?
Yesterday.
So you're doing that now?
Yes.
And how does that work? Like, who are you partnering with? What's your value add to them?
So I can't really share all the conversations we're having.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, we are in a lot of conversations with people precisely because we're doing something different.
Okay.
Right? And we're able to gather data and learning and intelligence today. I mean, so many of the companies who are engaged in autonomy are building technology for the future. And they have, small fleets of retrofit cars running around all over the place. That's very different from actually getting real-time data every day, minute by minute, that can be used to inform their own technology. So I think the fact that we are deployed today and gathering information, not just on the roads, but on how everything works in the whole ecosystem, is incredibly valuable to everyone who's participating in this. And Nauto's plan is really not to be, winner take all, walk into the corner. Our plan is to really create a network for everyone, that we can use all this information to make sure that everything is much safer and that we all win at the end of the day. So we're open to talking to everybody who's participating in this challenge and this opportunity. And so far, we've had some fantastic partners and investors and people who we're still in discussions with.
All right, we only have a few seconds left, and I know you guys hate predicting, but I'm going to make you do it anyway. So I want a one-word answer from each of you. I keep hearing different dates when we reach full autonomy and this becomes a thing and we don't have to worry about it anymore and it's standard. I keep hearing 2020. That seems really close all of a sudden. We're almost halfway through 2018. Give me a year.
Which nation? Which level of autonomy?
Yeah.
What
Level 5.
What level of market share?
Yeah, level 5, United States.
Level of market share?
Level, I don't know, whatever. Let's just most.
Level 5
Over
United
50.
States. So no steering wheel needed.
Yeah,
Drive
exactly.
anywhere you want, anytime you want.
When is
Inclement
that?
weather in Detroit.
Uh-huh.
2027.
Oh, I was going to say that. All right, I'll be different. 2027 and a half.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.